Hi, and welcome to the Health for Life podcast for those who want to build strong trucks and strong bodies. This is Kevin Muniz and Trisha Foley, your wellness team, bringing you practical tips and tricks to improve your health.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for listening in. We are excited to bring you our podcast today. Remember, we'd love your feedback, comments, and reviews. Please post them on Facebook and YouTube. Today, we are going to be talking about maintaining instead of gaining weight during the holidays.
Oh, yes, this is such a popular topic this time of year. With Thanksgiving and the holiday season right at our heels, so many are worried that it will end up packing on some unwanted pounds.
Well, we have their backs, right, Kevin?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so today we are going to cover some strategies that can be super helpful when it comes to maintaining weight through the holidays. And these include things you've probably heard about before, like environmental setup and nutrition swaps. But we are also going to dive into how our minds are wired too, and some tips for outsmarting ourselves.
Yeah, it's crazy how hardwired we are to crave sugar, salt, and fat. And when our ancestors were out hunting and gathering, they needed these three things to survive, so our brains rewarded us for eating these things.
Absolutely. The combo of fat, sugar, and salt light up that dopamine in the brain, which is the pleasure hormone. And because our bodies are so adaptable, the more you eat this combination, the more you need to eat to get that same hit of dopamine. This cycle is so hard to break.
Yeah, and on top of that, everything is so readily available these days that we don't have to hunt and be active to access food, which kind of creates the perfect storm for weight gain.
I know it's so tough, but understanding how our brains are wired will help us work smarter, not harder, when it comes to beating our cravings. Oh, and another interesting tidbit about the way our brains are wired, it our brains will unknowingly always seek out what is familiar and comfortable because it means it's safe. This is our primal brain at work. So the pumpkin pie that you have every year, your primal brain remembers it and rewards you for eating it. And by the way, this is all done unconsciously.
Man, no wonder it's so hard. But the good news is we have your back and we have some great strategies for overriding your brain.
We sure do. So first things first, restriction is not the answer. I think the tendency for so many people is to avoid and push away temptations, but this is not how we're wired. We are literally fighting an uphill battle when we do this. What does work is pre-planning, and let me explain why. Pre-planning uses another brain called the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal is used to make executive decisions and can override the primal brain. But if you don't use your prefrontal to make decisions about your food choices for Thanksgiving and parties ahead of time, you can bet that your primal brain will see the biscuits, pie, and casseroles in that moment, and no matter how much willpower you have, you won't be able to override it.
Wow, that is some powerful information. So take time before Thanksgiving and think about what you can't go without. What is it that makes Thanksgiving Thanksgiving? There are usually one or two items that are must-haves.
Yes. And then once you know what these items are, it's time to make a plan. Step one, obviously, is to know the must-haves on your plate ahead of time. Then, once that day arrives, start with a smaller plate. We eat with our eyes. If you put a cup of food on a large plate, your eyes will tell you that it's less compared to putting the same amount of food on a smaller plate. Trick your eyes and your brain and swap your plate out for a smaller version. Trust me, you'll eat less.
That is super interesting. I am loving these brain hacks.
Yes, they are definitely super helpful. Once you have the small plate, divide it visually into 3 quadrants. Half the plate can be unlimited vegetables or salad. These foods are full of fiber and nutrients that are good for you and will fill you up. Another fourth of your plate is protein.
Well, this will probably be turkey or ham, right?
Of course, for Thanksgiving, absolutely. And the last fourth of the plate is the must-have treat that you've decided on ahead of time. Maybe it's a biscuit or a sweet potato casserole, or maybe it's half and half of both to fit into that fourth of a section. It's all about enjoying the food and being mindful about how much you're having without the guilt.
I love that. I think too many try to be restrictive during the holidays, then it just ends up backfiring. Then they beat themselves up. I've heard this before, that you should talk to yourself like you're talking to your best friend. And you would never say some of the things that you say to yourself to them.
That is so true. Beating yourself up just makes things worse. Understand that this is just how we're wired. And instead, thank your body for trying to help you survive and then move on. You can almost start to laugh when you begin to understand in the moment what's really happening with your brain. Having that self-compassion is a much better approach.
That's interesting. I can see someone picturing their caveman self and saying, like, hey, Flintstone, I don't need that anymore.
That is a perfect way to picture it. I love that. So after you finish that small plate, another strategy is to check in with your hunger fullness scale. This is a 1 to 10 scale where 1 is starving and 10 is Thanksgiving full. The goal is to be around a 7 or an 8, which is satisfied but not too full. It's worth mentioning too that a 5 on the hunger scale is considered neutral. More than likely at parties, you're not going to be a 5, but it's important to know this because so many are a 5 when they eat emotionally. But that's another podcast. Knowing your number will help you gauge if you need seconds. Remember that you want to be a 7 or an 8 at the end of your meal, which is no longer hungry, but not too full either.
So just like Goldilocks, right?
Exactly.
So I'd imagine timing is also important. I mean, so if you gobble up your food in 2 minutes, your hunger scale would be off, right?
Excellent point. Yeah, it takes time for your ability to talk to your brain. If you eat too fast, pause and enjoy the company at the table before checking in on your fullness and getting more food. You may find that you don't need any more.
Well, that's a great idea. Shift your focus from foods to friends and family. And these are some really good brain hacks. But what are some good nutritional swaps?
Well, there are a lot of tips and tricks. For one, casseroles, you can adjust the recipe and add in more vegetables and less cheese and pasta. And this will increase the nutrition and reduce the calories, but still be delicious, and the kids will never know.
That's a great tip. What about for desserts, adding monk fruit or stevia way to cut sugar?
Yeah, absolutely. They are a great natural sugar substitute, and they can actually be substituted cup for cup when the recipe calls for sugar.
Oh. What about other strategies?
Sometimes brain work can be hard work, so working smarter, not harder, by changing the environment is helpful. So we mentioned the smaller plates, but some other ways would be using a veggie tray or a salad when you are a guest at a Thanksgiving party. Most people do bring a side, but many times there isn't a green thing in sight at Thanksgiving. So this way you can ensure that there is.
That's a really good point. Another really good strategy I use is to eat something before I get to the party. And that way I'm not starving when I get there and end up wanting to eat everything in sight.
Oh man, yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. Going back to the hunger scale, you want to avoid the extremes, 1 and 10. And we talked about 10, the Thanksgiving full, but 1 can set you up for failure too. 1 is considered starving, and you're absolutely right. If you go too long without eating, you will be just like a food magnet. When I work with patients, I tell them to try to be between a 3 and a 7 all day long. If you notice you're starting to get hungry, normally around a 3, it's time to grab a snack.
Yeah, and like you mentioned before, that primal brain is powerful. If you let it, it would run wild and no amount of willpower would stop it. That also makes me think of desserts, the thing most people crave the most. What are some strategies people can use when it comes to desserts?
That's a great question. And again, decide ahead of time. But in this case, environment is helpful too. Make sure to get these things out of your sight. If they're at a party, walk into another room. If you have leftovers, send them home with guests or freeze them for later.
Oh, so simple yet so true. Well, this has been some good stuff, pun intended. We hope to see these strategies to maintain and not gain over the holidays have empowered you to feel in control and ready to enjoy parties without feeling too stressed out about food. My big takeaway was to use your prefrontal cortex to predict your fix.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear your ideas and strategies as well. Make sure to post them on Facebook and share them with others. And of course, if you want more tips and tricks, feel free to schedule a health coaching session at no cost to you using the Care Here app.
Well, thank you all for listening. For more tips, reach out to us at
tfoley@carehere.com
or at kevin.muniz@consultant.com.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.